Good morning and welcome to day 3 of MediWales Connects, the NHS Collaboration Conference. And it's going to be a packed schedule. We're going to have a focus on innovation throughout the day, and we've got some really great speakers. Up to now, yesterday, we had some brilliant sessions on product development to start the day, value-based procurement, adoption and spread, and we closed the day with a really in-depth conversation about regulation. So we set the scene well, but we want to take on today with some of our innovation specialists, some of our innovation experts from around the Welsh NHS landscape, and we've got a great starting session to kick that off. We've got most of the health boards involved in our session, so we really are starting in the spirit of collaboration and bringing together as many parts of Wales and of our NHS, academia and industry ecosystem as possible. So those of you who are new today to the conference, welcome. And to those of you who've been following us for the last 3 days, then welcome back. You will know the format quite well, but just for those of you who are new today, we're really encouraging everybody to use the chat function in Zoom. This serves 2 purposes. It means that our speakers don't feel like they're talking to themselves. They're presenting from home offices, back bedrooms, kitchens, and so it's really great just to see your comments and to hear that you're enjoying the contributions and that you're participating. And please don't feel restricted to asking questions directly to the speakers. If you just want to introduce yourself, if you want to put your web address into the chat, please do. This is a collaboration conference, and the more interactions we have between participants, the better. You really are welcome to introduce yourself and to share your details. In a similar vein, we have a meeting platform, Meeting Mojo. That's one-to-one partnering online. You can find that link in your emails. Izzy should have sent you the link, and if you can't find it, if you received it a few days ago, then just drop Izzy a line and she'll send you a new link. But the Meeting Mojo one-to-one platform allows you to put your profile up online and to request meetings with other delegates, and to receive requests for meetings from other participants. So you really are encouraged to make the most of all of the facilities available. Use the chat, use the Meeting Mojo platform, and finally, if you could just engage with the Twitter feed, then that's another way of us getting our message out, communicating to a wider audience, and making the most of this week of focus on collaboration and innovation. So our Twitter handle is @MW Connects. And I think we've got a fairly lively chat also going on, just using the hashtag MW Connects. So use either of those, and the audience will find your tweets. So please do get involved, do participate. It can be difficult over Zoom to feel like we're all in one event, all in one room. But those facilities do help to make it feel like we are coming together for the week. So one of the benefits of Zoom is that we can welcome partners, speakers from across Wales, without everybody having to travel so much, keeping our carbon footprint down, and also having a bit of equity for members of our community wherever they are. So I'm very pleased to welcome from Betsy Cadwallader, our first speaker, and Chris Sube, who's a well-known friend to MediWales and has spoken on a number of occasions. So I'm really looking forward to Chris's presentation. Chris, are you in the room?
I'm in the room. Hello and good morning to you.
Excellent. That's always a slightly nervous point just at the beginning of the day, just to make sure that my first speaker has arrived. But now you're here, Chris, I will hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Gwyn, and good to see you. And I think we've got a lot of innovation going. Some of it is in hairstyles. I think you've grown a beard. I haven't been from months to a hairdresser, so um, I'm sure we'll do some analysis of that later on today. So it's a great pleasure and honor to open today's session. And my title is Patient Part Safety, what we learned from patients during COVID-19. And so I'm a consultant in acute respiratory and critical care medicine. I'm a senior clinical lecturer at Bangor University, and normally I spend most of my working day at the hospital front door. I see patients with acute medical emergencies. I ask them questions, I examine them. We talk about what the diagnosis might be, and then we make a plan. And given that this is emergencies, we know that 5 to 10% of the patients that I will see are coming to hospital for the last part of their journey through life. And we often have to have some very serious and sad conversations. And for that, we sit close to each other. I might be able to hold a patient's hand. And we usually bring other people in, relatives or a close friend, to be there doing this really personal and intimate conversation around living and dying. And obviously, this is what I normally do. And this was till March of last year when this happened. So I've spent most of the last 12 months in the COVID unit of the Spitty Gwynedd, and the way that we've dealt and interacted with patients has dramatically changed. So instead of trying to be close to patients, we've been trying to protect ourselves from potential infections and have been separated from patients by layers of plastic, face shields, masks, and it's been very difficult to have the same conversations that we normally have, especially around those difficult and challenging topics. So suddenly in March, outpatient clinics disappeared pretty much from one day to the other. So we couldn't speak to patients and examine them face to face in many cases. Emergency admissions changed completely. There were days where we didn't see anybody with ischemic heart disease or angina or heart attacks. There were weeks where nobody seemed to suffer from strokes, and we're still not quite sure what happened there. And then we obviously were admitting more and more patients with COVID. Some of our staff became unwell. Some of our staff were admitted to hospital, and in fact, we lost some of our staff to COVID. So it was a very different experience to what my experience of caring for patients normally is. So when healthcare is normally a complex system, and this is a graphic from my colleague Geoffrey Braithwaite from the Australian Institute for Healthcare Innovation that shows how complex and difficult it is to have the patient's journeys normally mapped out. You can imagine how much more this changed during COVID. And it's interesting, we think normally we're in charge of things, but actually lots of things go wrong. And this is a graphic from the National Reporting and Learning System that started up in October 2003, and you can see how the number of adverse events that have been reported has gradually grown over the years, and there was certainly an expectation that at some stage this number would plateau out and that we would learn so well that we would have less adverse events, but you can see that clearly that hasn't happened. So normally it's a complex system, it's got lots of challenges, so we're trying to affect this by bringing systems in that make things safer. And this is a model that John Welch and myself published in 2009 to see how we make things safe. So we think that for any problem, we need to record the information that's relevant for it. So for example, for severe infections, we might record temperature and blood pressure and the speed of breathing. Then somebody needs to recognize if those become abnormal. That's often a change from previous values. That needs to be reported to somebody who's able to respond with the right treatment and maybe some investigations. And then we need to repeat this cycle and over and over. And this is normally a process that's split up between different people. So we might have nurses who are recording this, and this might be nursing assistants. Then the trained nurse will recognize that there's an abnormality. That's escalated to, let's say, a junior doctor, and might be then escalated to intensive care. So it's a complex system that's got a number of different participants in it. So in COVID, all of this disappears. So now the patient is at home with maybe the same condition that it would have been previously treated in hospital. So who knows now how this patient is and whether they are getting worse? Well, maybe the patient knows. And who knows what's normal for the patients? Well, some patients will know what's normal for them. And I think importantly, those people that are close to them, so friends and family might also know. So those are the people that in COVID jargon will be those in the bubble. And so now that the patient is at home and hasn't got the same interaction with healthcare professionals, who cares for them? Well, maybe again, it's those who really care because they're close, friends, their family. So this means we can change the way that we think about the whole system, and we need to construct and design systems that are built around the patients and that are close to them, that allow us to record safety critical information, recognize when something is abnormal, and allow the patient to report this up to the appropriate person. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how we managed to do this over the last 12 months. So this is the National Adult Primary Care COVID Assessment Pathway, and you can see there is either a face-to-face or virtual assessment on the top, supported by some oxygen saturation measurement, and you got then a severity grading between severe, moderate and mild. And if you're on the green side on the right with mild saturations 95% or higher, a low respiratory rate, low heart rate, you might consider monitoring of those patients at home. So you give the patient some monitoring equipment. They then enter a virtual ward and they will take measurements, let's say twice a day, and will be called by a healthcare professional who will see how they are. And that allows you to care for the patients at home and to expand your bed base, because that was certainly something in the first wave that we were very worried that we would be outpaced by. Now, to take this one step further, we've collaborated with Welsh startup Aparito, SME, I should say, no longer a startup. And we designed a digital solution for that. The digital solution has got two components. The first one is a smartphone application that can be run on the leading operating systems, iOS and Android. And it's got symptom checkers, so questionnaires with common symptoms that would be worrying in those patients. And then an event diary where the vital signs are being recorded. Now, for this particular study, we had Garmin wearables, so consumer-grade wearables, because at that point there was no medical devices on the market that you could buy. But actually, people like wearing those, and they are able to record important data, and they can connect wirelessly into the application. And then there's a library with some information for the patient about their condition and escalation path. The patient downloads the app, they get a QR code to connect into the system. They then connect the wearable into the app and they're ready to go. And then as they record the data, that populates a dashboard for clinicians. The Garmin is an interesting device because it can record temperature, heart rate, oxygen saturation, so 3 important parameters, but then things that tell us about the functional status of a patient. How many steps are they able to do? Are they sleeping? Are they moving? And that then is reflected into a dashboard for clinicians. And on this dashboard, I can see who's unwell, and I can send them a text message, or I can pick up the phone and ring them. But some people might be well and don't need that particular checkup unless they don't send data anymore. Now, we've done this with patients with COVID and then with a cancer population that I think Ellen will present on tomorrow if you're interested. And I will just spend the last few minutes to talk about a second project that we did where we looked at another aspect of how patients can keep themselves safe. And this is an application that we designed together with Galactic, where the patient again uses questionnaires. And this is a very vulnerable group of patients. These are patients who are undergoing systemic treatment for cancer with chemo or radiotherapy, so some very toxic treatments. And normally, if they become unwell, they are being advised to call a telephone helpline. And the nurse who picks up the phone will have this list in front of them. This is the UCON's UK Oncology Nursing Society's checklist. And you can see there's a long list of questions that goes beyond this page. And depending on the answers are classified as green, stable, amber, might need some intervention, and red, come to hospital immediately. So we designed checklists for the patients to have those checklists on their own phone. And now comes the important bit. We allowed somebody that the patient chose, so a friend or relative, to have the same checklist and be connected to the patient. So now we got a network, a patient, a friend and relative, and a healthcare professional who all have access to the same information and can encourage each other to complete those. And so how this pans out, I can show you on this one. In our pilot study, we had 50 patients and relatives, and basically for the 2-month period, every week we had 6 interventions with the patient and 1 or 2 interventions from the friend and family. So throughout the time, we managed to get daily checklists completed, 3,200 users over 60 days by those patient population. And that's published now and is available. And so this is our bottom line from this. Safety is always a network. We're able to connect people in the community that can support each other. So what have we learned from patients during COVID-19? We've learned that a lot of things that we thought we had to do face-to-face, we can do virtually. And virtual clinics, I think, are here for us to stay. We have been able to deliver safer care, not just for patients, but with patients. And I think that's really central. And of course, emergency admissions have returned, and we're back to where we were before that. So if you're interested in this, in 2019, we had a 2-day event that was supported by MediWales and others, and we published a report with the Bevan Commission, which is called Patient-Powered Safety, Reducing Harm Through Co-Production with Patients. And on the 21st of May, we have the 3rd International Symposium with speakers from 7 countries around the globe to talk about how patients can contribute to making care safer in hospital, in the community, before surgery, with cancer, and in many other situations. Thank you very much for your interest. I'd be delighted to answer questions either here or face-to-face, or in fact, in the chat.
So, Chris, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you for that excellent presentation. And I would encourage people to ask their questions in the chat or the Q&A. We'll take questions any way you like. And I'm sure Chris is staying around for a little while to watch the other presentations. So, so if any questions pop up, please feel free to answer them. Chris, I can see one's coming in now. One question from me, Chairman's prerogative, always get to ask a question. You seem to be embracing the devices, the consumer devices for data collection. And now I've heard other clinicians express a concern that they could suffer from data overload. And given the very short amount of time that clinicians have with patients, maybe all of this data might create a problem with actually interpreting the data intelligently. How are you feeling about that?
You know, I think that's right, especially if you're using continuous data, and that is an issue. And I think the algorithms that evaluate this data are not quite ready for that. But if we're doing discrete data, so if we're asking patients twice a day to collect some data, I think then that's very similar to what I would do when I normally have somebody in clinic, let's say with asthma, and say, can you show me your peak flow diary? How has your breathing been over the last 4 weeks? Then I would usually encourage them to collect some data. So I got a good idea, not just how they are when I see them, which is a very short period of time, but also how they are in their normal environment. And I think that is the real strength of some of the consumer devices, that people are using them for sport or fitness already, and we're using that data now to interpret how their chronic conditions and acute exacerbations of those are progressing. Absolutely.
You get more normal scenarios where the data is taken rather than in a clinical setting.
And this deviation from normal is super important if we're thinking about safety. And so far, the patient is the only person who knows this. I don't know how they are in their own environment. I know how they are if they're on my turf, but that's actually not very relevant for most days.
Yeah, and just to counter that concern about data overload, I've also we had a presentation earlier on in the week where we learned that that use of these kind of devices and this kind of data can actually empower patients to take control of their own healthcare. So in some ways, they're taking the load off the clinician's shoulders.
Yeah, we definitely want to share, I think. Yeah. We don't want to feel them as if they are on their own out there. I think that's the real risk with this. Now you got all those tasks, and there's an interesting article recently called the work of caring. So the patient is taking the work of caring, and there's relatives who are doing this. And we don't want to dump this. We're doing this to enable them if they feel willing and able to do that.
Excellent, brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that. Intriguing, interesting as ever, and really good scene setter for the day. I'm going to send you off to the chat room now because it looks like you've got a few questions to answer in there. I hope there's some tricky ones for you.
Take care.
And it's my pleasure to introduce Owen Hughes. So we're coming down a little bit further south from North Wales. We're coming to Powys, and Chris is the consultant psychologist and head of pain and fatigue management services for Powys Teaching Health Board. Owen, are you in the room?
I am in the room. I'm just working out how to get everything to work on there. So
no problem at all.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a picture of you.
Good. That's good. Let's see if I can now see if we can get some slides up as well. It's not giving me the option to share screen at the moment, but let's hopefully that's going to change any minute now.
So if Izzy's there, yeah, I can see that Izzy's online. Are you able to help, Owen?
Yeah, would you like me to share them for you?
Yeah, for some reason I can't share them from this direction. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, that would be splendid. This is why I sent them in advance, just to do the
belt and braces.
Absolutely, yes. There's always a reason, isn't there? Always works.
Just loading now. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Right, I shall leave you to it, Owen.
Lovely. Okay, thanks very much, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some of the work we've been doing. What I'm going to talk about today is actually something that we started pre-pandemic, and is something that actually is a project that we've been looking at in terms of actually how we engage people in their own care, and follows on very nicely from what Chris was saying earlier, but actually, and it's particularly when you're in a very rural location like Powys or indeed North Wales, where potentially some people are having to travel sort of hours to get to appointments, and you may not see them for weeks on end. So how do we get engaged in that process using the digital resources? So we started this probably in March 2019, I think it was, when we first started looking at these things, and we're working with the Health Foundation as a partner to look at how we engage people, particularly when it comes to managing mental health and chronic pain. But since then, it's very much moved on from there. Our main aim in the start of this process was to explore how to design our processes so that from the moment someone is referred into the service, we're engaging them in this idea of how to self-manage and to build their own confidence, their own self-efficacy, and things like also helping them to engage in the process of shared decision making. So when someone's got a long-term pain problem, the last thing you want is for them to remain as patients. You want them to be people who have a pain problem, and that's what we're trying to do with this platform. So if I could move on to the next slide. So the problem we ended up starting with is to engage and inform both team members and service users using existing Microsoft 365 technology. Now, we started off looking at a range of different platforms, and then when COVID did hit, suddenly we were given a huge new range of tools that we could use. Next slide, please. So what we found is that there is potentially a complex ecosystem of tools that are already out there that we could use. And again, if we move on to the next slide, I'll just have a quick. So what we did was we started in the middle with things like the Bookings app and using Microsoft Teams for engaging. We did also try using Attend Anywhere to start off with, but found that actually things like the Bookings app working with Teams was much simpler. So what we were able to do is allow people to book their own appointments, to change their appointments, to book themselves into particular courses that they were interested in, very much sort of giving the control back over to them, and actually allowing people to communicate with us using Outlook and email and also Teams. And we found that actually what we were getting is a much better engagement from people in between sessions. Obviously, one of the first concerns we had, which was picked up earlier, was about the potential for there just be an overload of information coming in and lots of questions and whatever. But actually what we found was that wasn't happening. People were used it this sort of options very judiciously and very sensibly. And so actually, yeah, so that didn't happen. But what we were finding is actually a lot of the administrative tasks were taken on by the people using our service. So they were happy to book appointments and to do things that way. So in terms of what we've then done is worked with Red Cortex, who are the company who NHS Wales are working with to roll out the whole Office 365 package, and say, okay, well, what else can we use? We've got this incredibly powerful software out there in terms of Office 365, and also the sort of the power apps that come with it. So things like Power Automate and Power and the Power Platform. What else can we use to actually engage people and help people to use this sort of thing? So what we're now building is this ecosystem which actually uses it's all based on the Microsoft platform, and it's incredibly flexible. Because one of the things we've found previously when we were looking at other providers is we were very much reliant on what they were able to give us. Whereas this, using particularly the Power Platform, has got huge flexibility, so that actually we can do different things with it. So what we're able to do with this is actually to say to people, so that we've got the clinicians can use the platform. And there's a Power Automate allows us to automate a lot of the sort of day-to-day issues, that things, but also the people using the service can access a record as well. And that record is held on something that Microsoft refer to as Dataverse, which is basically a great big database, and that works in collaboration with SharePoint as a document repository. So what we're able to do then is to actually to look at the whole range of different things with things. So if I move on to the next slide. So what we're now putting together is a portal that a service user can access, that will enable them to access both resources which is specific to them, and also allow them to access certain elements of their record. And because we're using Dataverse, which gives us a lot of control over what people can access, both for the service user perspective, but also from the perspective of clinicians, administrators, and we also have digital facilitators who help people get used to using these platforms. So they log into that, and then we've got if I move on to the next slide. As I say, we've got the bookings platform that allows them to book into appointments with people that as part of their platform, and they'll also be able to access their own management plan. We can move on to the next slide. There are these dashboards which are infinitely creatable, so you can actually create different dashboards depending on who's accessing it. So we've got different dashboards for administrators, for the digital facilitators, and also for clinicians, and we've also then got a dashboard for the managers as well, so that we've got easy access to those sort of data that we need to feed back to the rest of the organisation. We move on to the next slide, please. And there's also a lot of, as I say, with the issue around the Power Automate platform, it allows us to automate a lot of the processes that were currently paper-based. So people are getting notifications when there's a new referral to be reviewed. People are getting information about how to move to do things. Next slide, please. And because we're using the Microsoft package, we're also then able to use the other tools that are included in the Microsoft package, things like the dictate thing. So what we're building is a solution where people can just dictate letters that go straight into a template, gets automatically printed out or emailed to the relevant people. We're building the API so that it will then connect in with the other portals like Work Clinical Portal and WCCG, or the new Welsh Admin Portal, and that's the next phase we're moving on to. Next slide, please. And then eventually, the other thing that we're going to be working on is linking into something called the Microsoft Community Training Platform, which works on the Azure platform, and that's about a way of hosting information online, both digital and written information, and also then allowing us, because it works within the Microsoft ecosystem, to monitor whether people are actually engaging with material, to see whether people have actually watched things, which is particularly important because what we're currently doing is asking people to watch some videos before they come along to an online group session, and what we need to know is that actually people have watched that, otherwise it's going to make life very difficult, and then they can automate those sorts of things. Automate whether people have attended the sessions, and that also then helps us with note keeping and things like that. So there's a huge amounts of administration, both for our admin staff and the clinical staff, which is being removed by the development of this process, and really allowing us to move forward and to do lots of different things. And we're really excited about the future, particularly as new products seem to come along all the time, and that allows us to do more things. And what we're also hoping, and going back to what was mentioned in the first speakers, is actually thinking about using those wearables and thinking about how we collect that data and package it in a way that can then give the individual that feedback, not just in terms of what's happening, but also what they can do about it, again to engage them in that process of self-management. So I'm aware of time, so I'll leave it there, and we'll go from there.
So thank you very much for that, Owen. That was really really interesting insight. I mean, one thing that comes across to me, well, two points you might like to comment on. Both with your presentation and with Chris's presentation, there was a time, there was a couple of years where those of us who were observing med tech and innovation were thinking there was innovations, especially in digital, that we were seeing in our lives as consumers, in our personal banking and in our communications, and I guess a lot of us were quite frustrated because we weren't seeing them being used in our health management. We were using iPhones and wearables in everyday life. We were doing our banking on our phones, and then when we went for our health checkups, it was all done on paper or faxes. It sounds to me like you're really making a step forward in using the technology that's available and grasping it and pushing that to the front of healthcare management.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and that's very much what we wanted to do, is to use the resources that we have available. I mean, we have Office 365 or Microsoft 365 now, which is a really powerful tool, and it seems to some extent it seems madness to continue buying other packages which don't necessarily fit in with the other systems, and that's why we're looking at the Microsoft ecosystem, because it all links up very easily, and allows us to gather data from outside as well. So it's a work in progress currently, but partly because things keeps changing on a daily basis. But but I think the future is really interesting, and what we're finding is people are just much happier to engage digitally now, although we do have the digital facilitators as well. I think we're really sort of moving forward.
Absolutely, and I'm sure if from the products that you've used and you've shown us today, it looks like you'll probably be well supported into the future. I don't think Microsoft are going anywhere, and I don't think 365 is going anywhere. So it looks like you're fairly well future-proofed there as well.
That was the other part of it. Is actually they update all these things. They've got their huge resources to make sure that it's all safe and secure. So all those things are very important.
Absolutely, thank you, Owen. Thank you very much. I'm going to send you off to the chat room now, just to check for Q&As in the chat room, and join in with that if you have time. Then I'm sure everyone will appreciate that. And thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to move on to our next speaker. So thank you. So I'm welcoming back Chris Hopkins, who was with us. Yes, for the final session yesterday. So thank you, Chris, for putting in 2 shifts. Haldar University Health Board Consultant Clinical Scientist and Head of Clinical Engineering. I do love a good clinical engineering talk because I actually understand the engineering side. I'm a bit shaky on the pharmaceuticals and the diagnostic side. So welcome to Chris. And Chris is speaking on Clinical Engineering, Innovation and Research Centre. Chris, are you there?
Thanks, Gwen. I hope you can hear me.
Can hear you, and I can see you're back on the beach.
Okay.
So I'll hand over to you, Chris. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thanks, Gwen. Okay, we just want to take you through the new team that we've developed during the pandemic over the last few months. Some very good examples from Chris and Owen this morning around sort of software applications, data integration and wearables, and we've seen quite an explosion really during the pandemic as far as technology is concerned as a whole. So what this team is all about is supporting our clinicians, particularly within Hywel, but across Wales as well, to bring these new ideas to fruition. The important point I need to make, because I have given this presentation previously when we were sort of just about beginning with the new team. We were called KIA previously, which is Clinical Engineering, Innovation and Research. But unfortunately, there was too much of an overlap with that name and our clinical lead, Professor Keir Lewis. And I got a bit tired, to be honest, of having to explain to people that we're actually talking about the team and not about Keir Lewis himself. So we've been through a bit of a rebranding exercise, and that's coming towards the final sort of point now where the new team name is Tritech. It's the Tritech Institute, and it's all about healthcare engineering and innovation. Okay, next slide, please. So what's it all about? It's very much driven by our clinicians. We won't take any project forward without the agreement and support of our clinicians. But it's a team of engineers, scientists, and clinicians working together to bring new, innovative medical technologies to bring them into fruition that benefit patient care. Where it's quite unique is it's a single point of access. So if you think of this team as a whole, it's the only team really of its kind within Wales, and very few examples across the UK as a whole. There's one similar team in Cambridge and another similar team in Nottingham. But where we think we are unique is that we can bring all sorts of global companies into this market. We can bring local manufacturers that maybe haven't really been in the healthcare sort of environment before, but they have, a lot of expertise in technology as a whole. So it's very much supporting our local economy as well. But we can support them then, taking them through the regulatory aspects, supporting them with clinical trials, and supporting them with all sorts of development options as well. It develops our clinical teams, it develops our engineering staffs, and it also obviously supports an economic growth and regional UK investment as well. Next slide, please. Here's just some examples of what we initially thought of when we were first sort of developing the team. Some examples on the screen here, we've been heavily involved with face visors and consumables for patient circuits during the initial stages of the pandemic, mainly due to the shortage as far as PPE was concerned, and also consumables in the global markets. We're very much collaborating with all of our university partners, so we can bring sort of human factors into the design and evaluation stage as well. I mentioned this earlier, regulatory and compliance advice. It's quite a complex world, and we were talking about this yesterday in the regulatory workshop. Lots of changes going on at a UK and European level at the moment. So it's helping these companies sort of and walking them through exactly what they need to do to bring these devices to market. We've talked a lot, and there's lots of examples from Owen and Chris this morning around digital health and supporting our clinicians with mobile apps and wearables. Modeling, analysis and decision support, sensing and imaging. I'm not going to go through every single one, but some very sort of very clear examples really on where we can help everybody concerned. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is where we're very much unique as well. We're not an independent sort of institute organisation. We've got very strong links with our university partners. We are sharing the team and the resources between ourselves, Swansea University, and Trinity and St David's as well. So the new team will be spending time in the university and also spending time within the institute itself in Llanelli. We've obviously got the NHS links and strong links to our clinicians, and then we've got the sort of all Wales links into Welsh Government, and also as well Arch and ATIC. We've got a very strong relationship with ATIC, which is the Assistive Technologies Innovation Centre in Trinity St David's, Wales as well, in the university. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to summarise, I've talked a bit about this already. So what are our 4 pillars? What can we provide? So it's very much advice and advocacy, so specialists or consultancy advice around the regulatory aspects, around clinical aspects, technical aspects. We can do feasibility studies on new technology. We can bring in patients into this, because it's very important that when we develop these new devices, that patients have an input into that development. We can support IP, and we can develop those strategic partnerships as well across Wales. We've got the educational element as well. We've got the research element, and we've also got trials as well, as far as technical and clinical trials, and also service evaluations as well. Next slide, please. So the senior team themselves. So there's a horrible photo of myself. That was my wedding, actually. So I'm the scientific lead for the team. Professor Keir Lewis, who is a professor of respiratory medicine at Swansea University, but also one of our consultant respiratory leads in Hywel Dda. We've got Dr. Leighton Phillips, who is our Director of Research, Development and Innovation, and we've got Rachel Jermaine as well within that team. They're a very, we all share a very similar mindset, that we don't want to put a strict sort of framework around what we can provide as a team. We're very flexible, but ultimately at the heart of everything we do, it's about patients, and anything that can bring a substantial patient impact, whether that be a technology or any sort of innovation whatsoever, we're very keen to support that moving forward. Next slide, please. In my last presentation, we haven't actually appointed into the new team, but I'm pleased to say we have now. So a few key members up on the slide here. Dr. Matthew Lawrence is our research associate. He has a specific interest in blood sciences and rheology, and a very strong background in medical technology development. Peter Jones is our regulatory expert, lots of experience as far as ISO 9000 systems and ISO 13485, and also has a very strong sort of technology adoption background as well. Billy Woods is a recently qualified clinical scientist. He's come down from Liverpool, but has a very strong rehabilitation engineering background, so he brings an added dimension to the team. And we've also got, sorry, I can't see the, sorry guys, I lost the slide there. And we've also got Dr. Gareth Davis as well. Again, a specialist in blood sciences, but also a strong background. He actually developed his own software company, so a strong background in software development as well. Next slide, please. I wanted to share with you some recent sort of research that we've undertaken and some of the publications. I'm afraid I can't share with you the work we're currently engaged in because there are a number of non-disclosure agreements on that. But I'll just take you through some of the recent work. So the first one on the left, when we looked at that cloud-based defibrillation system, that was recently published in the Institute of Physics and Engineering in Medicine just over a month ago. What happened here during the COVID pandemic, the UK Resuscitation Council unfortunately changed the resuscitation guidance during the pandemic, which was great for our clinicians because it was more focused around the COVID position as a whole. But for us as engineers, it put us in a very difficult position because we had to reconfigure all of our defibrillators across all sites. All of that had to be done, previously it had to be done manually. So we had to get every defib in to reconfigure, which, you know, it's quite a laborious sort of and logistical challenge, really. Fortunately for us, our defibs were kind of an age in stock, so we needed to replace those defibs, and we replaced them with defibs that now have Wi-Fi connectivity. So whenever the resus guidance changes and the algorithm changes, we can now log in remotely from any PC within the organization and change those configurations remotely. We don't need to get these defibs in anymore. What the added dimension of this technology as well is that we can now analyze any CPR event with our resus teams and our clinicians to see where the learning is. And we can also share all of these CPR events with our tertiary centers now and our cardiac centers remotely. A couple of other examples on the screen there. I'm currently part of a UK study looking at what we call air scrubbers. So these are UVC cleaning devices that we can drop into endoscopy areas, respiratory wards, dental units, where they'll basically clean the air of any viral bacterial particles within that room. The science was proven as far as UVC and the impact that has on various viruses and also on SARS-CoV-2 as well. It actually strips the outer layer, the outer protein layer of the virus, which as a consequence destroys the virus. But all of the research was in a laboratory environment. It was never undertaken in a real world study. So we've been working on that for the last 2 months using what they call CFD, which is computational fluid dynamics, to look at the impact within a dental room within Birmingham Children's Hospital. And that research is about to conclude very soon. We've also had some work published in the International Journal of Healthcare Systems Engineering, and we've also got 2 abstracts into the Global Clinical Engineering Conference, which takes place this October in Florida. I'm very happy, as time moves on, I'm very happy to share the ongoing work and the work we've just begun really as a team, but now's not the time. Okay, next slide, please. Here's some further work we're collaborating with Attic in Trinity St David's, where we're looking at Cpap masks and individualizing Cpap masks, because you can imagine a typical Cpap mask, even though it does come in different sizes, never fits a patient exactly. So we're doing some work with Attic to look at the design and sort of and the applications of new types of masks moving forward. Next slide, please. And this was a case study, my COPD PAL. This was a software app that was developed during the pandemic. Another example of some of the work that the team are looking at. Next slide. And I think that's it, Gwyn. So I'm very happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Chris, great work. Encourage everybody to engage and ask questions on the chat. But again, first question that comes to my mind is just, I mean, with your work and with the wider activity going on, it really does feel like Hywel Dda is a place to be for innovation at the moment, and there's some really exciting work going on there. Is that how it feels from your point of view? And can you give any top tips to other professionals?
Yeah, some good always comes from, particularly from the pandemic. And, I've been campaigning, and I'm sure you have as well, Gwyn, for a number of years, that we need this sort of provision really in Wales as a whole. And I'm very pleased that our finance director and our executive team, saw the, I think living and breathing some of the problems and the issues we had to deal with during the pandemic brought things to the fore. But I'm really pleased that their executive team supported that. It is very much around collaboration. So I'm in discussions with Cardiff at the moment because it'd be nice to have another team across Wales, if I'm perfectly honest. So we're at that sort of juncture at the moment where it's a small team. We can manage a lot of the work within the Hywel Dda sort of geography, but to support the whole of Wales, we'd need to look at that a bit more seriously, obviously, as well. So it would be nice. I think the conversations in Cardiff are starting to mature, I believe, and I'm very happy that that's happening, to be honest. So yeah, it's I'm absolutely over the moon, if I'm honest, Gwyn, and I think this has enormous potential for the future, particularly supporting our patients and our clinicians, really, because we get these ideas. I've had these ideas from clinicians for a number of years, but we struggle sometimes to pull it all together and to sort of devote the resource to it. So it's great that we've got scientists, engineers, researchers all on board, really, to support all of these new innovations.
So yeah, I have seen some tremendous clinical engineering expertise across Wales in Hywel Dda and other health boards. So it is really great that you've come forward with a brand, I think, and a front door, that overused term, a front door for access to clinical engineering, because quite often the clinical engineers are there and they're doing a sterling job, and but sometimes they're not pushed to the front and publicised as much as maybe they should be. So no, that's really great. One thing that we touched on yesterday, which maybe we won't go into quite so much detail today, but I just wanted to mention is, you sat in a session and held your own with some serious regulatory experts last night, and so I was just wondering whether you could just comment on the need when you're doing clinical engineering in-house within a health board to have that regulatory expertise, so that you at least know what the requirements are for new innovations that come from a clinical setting.
It's fundamental, Gwyn, and I can give you a specific example, really, during the COVID pandemic, where, it's no sort of secret. We had a shortage of ventilators and Cpap units and all sorts across the globe, not just in Wales. And a good friend and colleague of mine developed a Cpap unit, working with a local manufacturer. But we weren't involved from a regulatory perspective and technical perspective. We probably came to the party halfway through that development, and then what we had to do then is backtrack because the regulatory aspects hadn't been considered and hadn't been covered off. And we got it through MHRA, through the rapid approval process, and it was a positive outcome. But it just sort of demonstrates for me, really, the importance that, even when you're in the middle of a research trial or clinical trial of any sort, even though the actual regulatory aspect doesn't really technically apply, it does. You still have to keep your technical file. You still have to consider all of the safety issues around the design and development. So it's fundamental. And I've seen it so many times in my career where all of these innovations, they've got towards the end of the sort of, the design phase, but they haven't considered the regulatory impact. And then you have to go back then and redesign certain functions. So yeah, it is fundamental.
So the top tip is seek advice and consider it early, because you'll have to go back and you're going to lose time in the project launch if you don't consider regulation from the beginning. So probably another reason to go and give Chris a call and ask for advice. Chris, that's great. I've got one question that's come in from Richard Brain from Evolve Robotics. Richard says, what impact do you think UVC technology will have on our healthcare services and the wider industries? Do you think this will be adopted nationwide?
I need to temper my enthusiasm here. What I can say is, from the UK study we've just undertaken, the results from a modelling perspective are extremely positive. we're already seeing a number of organisations, healthcare organisations, purchasing these devices. There are good and bad devices out there, because the whole principle is that you're recirculating room air through a UVC lamp at a specific wavelength. The important aspect is contact time. So any viral particles passing into that UVC lamp, you need to make sure that your contact time is appropriate to make sure that you kill any bacterial viruses. But I think you've only got to look at the US and Canada. They adopted this technology years ago, and it's very effective, in all fairness. So I think it will, I'm probably putting myself on a limb here, but I think it will change the landscape considerably in the future, because we are not just thinking about CoV SARS-2 now, we're thinking about all sorts of other viruses and bacteria moving forward.
Absolutely, I can see it being a part of a kit of tools that we all have to consider as we develop facilities into the future. We're working with a company called DTR Medical, who are not far from you. They're down in Swansea, and they're developing products to prevent aerosol generating procedures. So you mentioned endoscopy there, which I think comes into that category. So so in those particular environments, it is particularly important to have air management. So
particularly endoscopy, Gwen, because your turnaround time with your patients at the moment is approximately 20 minutes between each patient, because they have to clean down the environment. Whereas if you can introduce one of these air scrubbers and reduce that turnaround time to, say, 5 minutes, it means you can get more patients through the, so the patient impact really as a whole has a massive consequence as well.
And just final question, what is the beach behind you? Because I've seen it in 2 sessions now and I can't place it. So
I think it's Freshwater East. We debate this every single time, to be honest. But I remember taking a photo, but I can't remember where it was actually taken.
So if you can remember, then pop it in the chat, and I'll send you to the chat anyway, just to check that there aren't any more questions for you. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thanks, Gwyn. All the best. Right,
and I get to move on. So we've covered North Wales, we've covered Mid Wales and Powys. We've been over to Hywel Dda. And so now we're going to come a little bit further south, and it's my pleasure to introduce Rob Salter from Cwmtaf Morgannwg University Health Board, again in clinical engineering. So Rob, I don't know whether you've got any comments about the previous presentation, but are you there? Are you on the call? This is always the most nervous point for me. And I can see that Rob is on the call. You're still on mute, Rob, and I can't see your camera, so I don't know whether you're having.
Mute and start my video. There we go.
There we go. I think. Oh.
Share.
So we heard you there, Rob.
Right. Just plowing through a load of pop-ups at the moment, which complaining about my video.
Is this a firewall issue?
Yes. Yeah, the NHS still decide sitting on the thing that they don't like Zoom. Well, we're not going to win that battle.
No, I've tried and tried. The problem is there's no point in us going over to Teams either, because if it's not NHS Teams, then it has the same challenges as Zoom. So we do our best. Izzy, do you have Rob's slides?
Yeah, would you want me to share them, Rob, or would you like to share them yourself?
If you could share them for the moment, because I don't think it's liking me trying to do it.
Yeah, that's great. I'll put them up now.
That's brilliant. If Izzy can do that, then I will hand over to you, Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Salter. I'm a specialist healthcare scientist based at Clinical Engineering in Royal Glamorgan, and I'm also one of the scientists for the Cwmtaf Health Board Advanced Digital Physiological Engineering Hub, which is an innovation spin-off that we've started at Cwmtaf Morgannwg, and it's early days, but it's basically given that an innovation platform for anybody in the health board that needs to progress things forward. So I'm going to give a brief talk about some of the work I'm doing. A lot of the exciting work that we're doing, I'm afraid, is now locked into IP with Agor IP, and they've told me I'm not allowed to present. So I'm going to stick about the stuff that we've published on. So that is open public domain. So we're looking at medical device information collection, electronic management systems. What we're trying to do in CumTAF is we're trying to break the silo systems culture. We've had decades of proprietary information formats, lock-in data into specific applications, and it's, as I put it, it's a curse of the NHS that we just got nothing that talks to each other. We've currently in CumTAF Mechanic Health Board 160 currently active IT projects, and the collaboration between them, where they can actually talk to each other, you can count on one hand. And as a health board, we've said this has got to stop. So, next slide, number 3. So our vision for CumTAF Maganog, led by our Chief Information Officer and our digital ADIs, is a Lego brick approach where we don't really care what the application is or where it comes from. What we care is that it complies with a set of rules, set data sets, and we can just plug and play and move applications in and out. But the beauty of Lego bricks is that they're shaped so that you can actually put something bigger in than that was there before, or you can put something smaller in and it'll still fit. And that's what we want to do. We want to encourage our new software, that our future purchases, to be more embracing and to think about how many slots in the Lego wall they can fill. So that's quite a big ask for us as a vision. And next slide 4. So where that meant for us is we have to reinvent specifications. And we have been very lucky that we've had some very good projects where we've been given permission to bend and to the point of practically breaking procurement rules. We were allowed to procure on blue sky thinking, procure without horizon scanning, and procure on the concept of what could you offer that's best for us. And we have to ask these sort of questions, we need to ask, how do we need things to work? How do we want to visualize? How, we're looking at patient flow data. How do we manage that data? But we also ask very important questions like, do we need any more reporting software? Do we need any more technology? And the crucial element of all is everybody can promise communication between systems, but how long can we wait for it to happen? And we need to kind of put our reinvented specifications to say that we need that to happen now. So we've got next slide 5. We've our new specification needs that we're now working with when we go out to companies is we want to continue working the way we are. You saw earlier in Chris's slides about how complex the patient flow, how complex the NHS works. We have kind of optimized that to the best of our ability to and localized it to the needs of each individual hospital. Yes, we can bring in disruptive technologies that could change that drastically, but most of the time we need to just think, well, we're actually working the most optimum way. Can we continue working this way? So we need systems that actually say, how do you work already? And we'll work the same way as you. So that way we protect our investment in the current systems. And for me, which is a fundamental thing, is our nurses and doctors, I feel, are personally overworked, and they're the heart of the NHS. And we can't be giving them more and more apps, more and more software packages, more and more logins, and just burdening them with data. We need to start thinking about how we can give them glass panel approaches to the data, and to put data where they've used it already, and to put data into applications that they trust. And so you're going to get the mileage as you use an application. and for that, then what we want from a system or a medical device, we want our medical devices to be the source of information and not the owner of information. And that's really important, because what we're seeing with the silo systems is they own their data and they lock it away in their own little castles, and that's of no value to anybody. What we want going forward is everything to be a source, and the NHS is the owner of the information, so that the source of the information, then it just gives it over to the NHS to say, use this how you want. And that's how we then start fitting it with the national strategies. We can have one size fits all, and we can build things where we can expand systems with nice simple licensing models that allow things to talk. So moving on. So slide 6. So if I give an example of our RFID system, which we've done through the Digital Health Ecosystem Wales and the Life Sciences Hub in Cardiff, we got given quite a substantial amount of money to go out to the market for a blue sky system. We could have quite easily spent the money just going to an off-the-shelf RFID system with any one of a number of suppliers that would have come in, put tags on our equipment, give us another asset management system, and told us, there you go, you're tracking your equipment. But that's not what we wanted. So we went out to the market and we said, well, if we give you a big pile of money, what would our system look like? What would it do? And that's when they come back with, it's like, well, we'd utilize existing technologies we've already got in the hospital. So if you've got Cisco Wi-Fi, we'll utilize that and embed it into our system to make our system even better. But then the real crux of it come when they said, well, the financial model for the existing systems in the market seemed to be the more you use it, the more you pay for it. And we said, well, that's the barrier. So what Conceptual said is, well, surely the better the quality of your data and the better the accuracy of the data, the more you should pay for it. So if we only give you low quality, low accuracy data, you only pay a small price for it. And if you want it to get better, you pay more and it gets better. And for us, that was value-based healthcare. We were like, well, yes, because the more we want from it, the more reward we get from it. So we partnered now with Conceptu to pilot RFID tracking throughout the hospital for medical devices, beds, all facilities equipment. But we also brought in patient wristbands. So we were able to model patient flow in our A&E departments, and looking at not so much tracking the patients, but analysing how and where the patients are in the department, why they're in certain places, certain times, looking at patient flows into radiology, whether or not we need to throttle things because radiology is not performing as well that day, so we're overloading it. And once we started seeing this data and realizing how useful it was, we were able then to bring in some machine learning and sort of the first early steps into AI. And we're now actually looking at the tag information, and we can actually sort of predict what the patient flow is looking like in the A&E department. And we can actually start flagging up to the porters that equipment's needed in A&E to support the number of patients coming through the door. So that the system is actually getting in front of the actual events, which for us, that's a new way of working. So let's move on to slide 7. So what we achieved with this RFID system is, I don't know, you look at all my slides here, what I won't mention is tracking, because it proved that tracking become pretty minor in the thing. We're achieving hundreds of locations updated every hour on anything we needed to know where it was. But the beauty of the system was, and this is the blessing of the approach we took with APIs, is we only have 2 to 3 sessions a week where someone actually has to log into another piece of software. All the nurses, doctors, our clinical engineering staff, they're all seeing this information presented in their existing applications. And for me, that is a real game changer, is the fact that we have gone seamless, that we don't have to, we got lovely software that presents maps of the hospitals, and they can track equipment all over the hospital using the maps, but they don't need to use it. If they need to know where equipment is, it's presented where they'd be looking for it in the first place. So we've got hundreds of staff now being accessing live data all day long. We've got a lovely agnostic API platform that we're now able to just plug any system we want into it. It really is just a brick in the wall. But we're also finding now new ways of looking at location information. Something that really is cropped up now is dwell times, movement profiles. It's really changing how we look at equipment, capital planning, how we look at when during COVID, when we're changing the models for how we isolate patients, how we don and doff in times between rooms and stuff like that. Their tracking information was there, was presenting the data. We introduced a new step. Instantly, we could see on the data, well, this is actually slowing down the process, or this is speeding up the process. So we had live data of how well we were performing in COVID, and the real bonus in the system when COVID struck was we actually knew where our equipment was, and we knew what equipment was at risk. There was no more equipment slipping out from one ward to another ward, maybe a lapse in cleaning or infection control, and you've got a piece of equipment which is now a risk to another ward of passing on and spreading the COVID virus. So that was a real bonus in the fact that we could actually see where equipment had been from an infection control point of view. Next slide. So the beauty of our RFID system, why it's innovation, why it's important, is we're now just getting out of that infamous valley of the death. We've done the pilot studies, we proved it worked. We had loads of losses of stakeholders, with loads of changes in roles, and we've gone for that the horrible stage where we think, well, was this all worth it? And we're now coming out of that because everybody's knocking on the front door now and saying, we hear you've got RFID, how can we integrate this into our system? So the next steps for us now is we've got a project board looking at RFID information being presented on our digital whiteboards on each ward. So there's live information on a large screen right at the nurse's station. We've got our Scan for Safety program. Have said, hang on a minute, guys, didn't you implement GS1 on all your RFID tags? We're going to want that in our Scan for Safety program. Can you come into Scan for Safety? We've started a project pilot where we manage our oxygen cylinders around the hospital. They're now tracked, which is we went into that project thinking that the problem was the number of cylinders and the shortage of cylinders in the hospitals, and if we could track them, we'd know where they were. What we discovered was that the real problem was medicines management. Oxygen cylinders go out of date, and they were out of date cylinders still stuck in cupboards. And we're now actually working with pharmacy to make sure that they can actually got governance over their oxygen cylinders, and we know our cylinders are getting returned to BOC in a timely manner. The new project that's just starting is that we need to start tracking COVID samples between hospitals so that patients can go home or be transferred to hospitals quicker. So it's given staff visibility on where their test is and how quick we are or close we are to getting a patient to go home. And then there's the other things that get forgotten in innovation projects for us is knowledge sharing. Through the RFID, we now user experience groups, national groups looking at what we can gain from RFID. And for the health board, we've participated in quite a bit of consultancy work for RFID. We've worked collaborative with the Royal Navy and South Wales Police. And again, it's knowledge sharing. We're able to offer them, lessons learned and share with them, our pains as well as our successes. And that's a really important part of any innovation is getting what you did out there to the rest of the world. And also what we've realized is that we've done a lot of in-house development, and with our partner Kinsetsu, it created an opportunity for us to be a spin-off. So we could actually say, well, there's IP in the work that you've done. Let's sell it and make it products. So next slide. So for us, continuing with our API journey, the success we had with RFID and APIs, we're now just starting a joint project with the Digital Health and Care Wales, which is formerly known as sort of NWIS, to look at the National Data Repository, which is the All Wales NHS a data warehouse effectively for all clinical measurements, which at present doesn't receive any information from medical devices. So this is a HR7 FHIR API based warehouse that can receive data from any sort of HR7 source. So what Hillrom approached us for, and they said, well, we've just had this remit from NHS in England saying that their latest systems must comply with FHIR, and if you want to sell your products, you must be FHIR. And Hillrom, the Welsh Allen blood sats observation monitors, what they said was, well, can we come and test our product with you? Can we build these interfaces, do some pilot studies, get it working with the Welsh data repository, and once we've got a scalable product, they can then sell it to the English NHSX, and effectively, it becomes a global product. But for us, the real win was, they approached the Welsh hospital that understood the importance of APIs, understood the importance of data sharing, and chose us as a partner. So I think we are seeing some real wins now in Wales with how big global companies are approaching us for partnerships. So why APIs are so important to us as a health board? We actually think now that the data generated by the machine is more important than the machine itself. Historically, equipment was bought on its usability, preferences of clinicians and stuff, and the quality of the data that came out of the machine was never a main factor in why you'd buy that machine. And we're changing that now. We're now looking at, well, the data generated in the machine will be very important in the procurement element, and if it's not good enough, then it doesn't matter if the machine is exactly what they want. Then if the data is not good enough, it's not the machine for us. The important thing, which is what Chris alluded to earlier, and Gwyn really sort of hit the nail on the head when he was talking about his iPhone experiences, is the patient expects a digital experience from us, and I hold that passionately. This is not about meeting patient expectations and delivering 4-star, 5-star hospitals, with Michelin's food, but this is just that simple digital experience where, for me, it's the analogy of if you went into a shop, you would expect to be able to pay with your credit card, pay and go. That's just a given now for any retailer and any customer. That sort of given expectation needs to be translated into the NHS as well. The patients should be entitled to think, well, I got data on that machine, it's being generated, that's GDPR, and I expect the health board to be storing it safely, managing it safely, and managing it, in my best interests. And that is the beauty for us, is what APIs will deliver. Our data needs to be shared to be useful. That is such an important thing. If we can't move it around, we just go back into siloed cultures. And the important thing, which is why we're learning, why we're working with partners like Welsh Allen, is without new data sets, none of these clinical systems can evolve. When we sat down with NWIS to talk about their APIs and integration into Welsh Clinical Portal and stuff, the first thing they said is, but there's no option in Welsh Clinical Portal for you to put your results into. And we said, we don't care. It's chicken and egg. it's time that we actually start presenting data sets so that the next people to evolve clinical systems say, oh, by the way, do you have a data set for OBS? Do you have a data set for this diagnostic? And we can say yes, and we know where we can get that data from, so that we can actually see clinical systems evolve. So we have to remove the dependencies and lock-ins. Without that, there will be no evolution in systems. And APIs have become one of the big enablers for breaking free of the capability barriers, which we see in the historic products. And as Chris Hopkins alluded to with the defibrillators, we've done the same programs here where cloud-enabled defibrillators have changed the way we're working. Previously, they wouldn't have been available, and we were locked out of so many different types of benefits because we never had that ability for systems to talk. But now, we are now pushing with the manufacturers. If you can't talk, if you can't share your data, and really be agnostic and not precious about the ownership of your data, then we can actually buy your product and actually do something really constructive with it. So for us as a health board, I think we really are moving forward in the digital integration of medical devices. But most importantly, going exactly back to Chris's comment and my first point, we're finally getting our technology to where the patient thinks and has assumed we were at, but we fell woefully short in the past, and but that's changing. That's last slide. So any questions?
So thank you very much for that. That was a real pleasure to listen to. What great news that you've implemented what you called a game changer, and I can only agree with that, because I think although you implemented these systems for specific purposes, as I think you're now you did allude to, you've got people knocking on your door saying how else can we use them. So that's absolutely fabulous, and I know that a lot of manufacturers who are listening in will be very pleased, because manufacturers are have been tackling the implementation of UDI, or unique device identification, for some years, and I know that a lot of them have struggled with the fact that although you can track products right the way up to the gate of the hospital, once they go into the hospital, then they fall into a black hole. So now you are managing that end, and although you said tracking was a minor benefit, I can see that now being able to track assets and manage assets within the hospital environment is going to be a huge benefit.
Yeah, and also what we're doing with these systems is trying to explain to people, if we take the mesh implants as an example, we had a team, I think it was 5 or 6 clinical people, because they had to go through patient notes and read patient notes. So they had to be clinical people, pulled away from the front line, just to analyze patient records, so we could go through all that paper and find what patients had what implants. And with tracking with the UDI, going forward, that will be available at a push of a button. And it's just one simple database search, and you found that information. And isn't that exactly what everybody should expect? Because if you say we've got a modern digital NHS, well, you don't expect to have an office full of people scouring through paper for a year as a robust, that is, to me, going back to, if we're still doing practices like that, then we are not selling ourselves as an effective NHS. So if we can show that we are using digital really cleverly and stuff like that, we are meeting the public's expectation of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Rob. And just to remind everybody that tomorrow we have a day dedicated to digital, and that's being done in partnership with the Digital Health Ecosystem Wales and Welsh Government. So so if digital is your thing, or if the use of digital is your thing, then please do make sure that you attend tomorrow. Rob, thank you so much. I'm not sure if there are any questions. I think there's a couple of comments thanking you for your presentation, and I've been doing my best to do some translation.
I appreciate that.
3-letter acronyms, or TLRs, yes. Which is I'm doing my best on that. But if you want to correct me on anything, then feel free. Right. I'm going to hand over to the next speaker, Dr. Richard Evans, Swansea Bay this time. So we're heading back up the M4 a little to Swansea Bay, and Richard is Medical Director and Deputy CEO. So it's a real pleasure to welcome you, Richard, and I hope you've got the flavour of the event now. And I'm going to hand over to you, and I've got Sean Charles as well, in a collaborative effort, I understand.
Doing a bit of a double act this morning.
Excellent.
Now we've got some slides. I don't know whether we can put those up. I'm going to do a bit of an intro and let Sean do the next bit. There we go. Oh. That's great. Yes, thanks for inviting us to speak. It's a fascinating event, and it's a great subject for us to get into. So as far as Swansea Bay is concerned, the purpose of the discussion this morning from our part really is to talk a bit about ARCH and the programs that we're setting up within ARCH. And ARCH, if you don't know, stands for Regional Collaboration for Health. And it's a collaboration between Swansea Bay University Health Board, Swansea University, and Hywel Dda University Health Board. Its purpose is to improve the health, well-being and the wealth of the South West Wales region by working in collaboration, and to enhance our ability to deliver meaningful change to improve the health, well-being, service transformation, workforce research, enterprise innovation. It's a massive area for us. If you go to the next slide, Sean. Thank you. So what does that mean in reality? Well, it means, I think, two things. Firstly, it means that the two health boards, along with Swansea University, are able to collaborate. Of course, the boundaries between health boards are entirely false. While we, as the workforce within health boards, have that affiliation to the health board boundaries, it doesn't make any difference to patients at all, really. And so it allows us an opportunity to work together across those boundaries to make sure that we're much more lined up than perhaps we've been historically in terms of our clinical priorities, joint working together, delivery of regional projects, innovations, joining up on value-based healthcare, and equal access for the population. And then alongside that, the second part of that is obviously the two health boards working alongside Swansea University in its strategic vision and purpose, in the sense that that's a much broader agenda in terms of civic mission, the two health boards being university health boards and delivering learning, teaching, undergraduate and postgraduate, and obviously research, enterprise and innovation. And with the three organisations with this commitment, it's allowed us to get into some very interesting areas. The next one, Sean. So from a personal reflection, I've been with the health board for about 2 years now. And what's striking about ARCH is that it does genuinely allow that collaboration across health board boundaries. So we've got clinicians talking to each other across Swansea Bay and Hywel Dda. We're working jointly together on a range of different projects to improve the services that we offer. We obviously benefit then in reaching across the whole of the expertise of Swansea University. So this isn't a medical school thing. This is very much the whole of Swansea University, and it's being able to work with all of the expertise in that area and bring that on board. And then lastly, certainly in terms of innovation, one of the most fascinating things for me is bringing clinicians and industry together. And the benefits of that are twofold, just from personal observations. And firstly, that's industry don't always fully recognise what clinicians are interested in or what's important to clinicians, and so closing that gap. And perhaps even more interestingly is that clinicians aren't necessarily aware of the next steps or the 2 steps ahead in technology and innovation, and then maybe thinking about the next generation or 2, whereas industry will have ideas about where we're going, certainly in terms of things like nanotechnology, 5 or 6 generations ahead, that's completely mind-blowing for clinicians in expanding the possibilities of what we could achieve together. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to Sean, who's going to take us into a bit of the detail about what projects we're up to at the minute.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard. Yeah, as Richard says, I'm going to take you through a little bit of where we are at the moment and where we're going. It's a very interesting time for Arch. The COVIDness of everything, which we're all very familiar with, has put a little bit of a hold on a number of the service changes over the last couple of years. But as we start to emerge from this process of change, it gives us an opportunity to reset a little bit. So what I've been doing over the last couple of months since I've joined the program is working on the Arch priorities, what they look like and what the future looks like for Arch. So I'll take you through a little bit of that at the moment, quickly. Generally, I think I won't spend too much time on a couple of the slides because I think that the most interesting part of this is the work that we're doing at the moment around innovation, supporting collaborations with industry and academia. So I'll probably spend a bit more time on that than on other elements of the presentation. So the first theme or the first priority that we've got with Arch at the moment, and this is what everything hinges around. In the past, people who will be familiar with Arch will recognize work streams, but the theme at the moment is service transformation. And some of the projects that we've got on the books at the moment, and there will be other projects, I'm sure, joining this over the next few months. But the main ones that we're dealing with at the moment are a really exciting piece of work around regional pathology, where we're looking at the West Wales region from a pathology perspective. We've got a number of business cases in consideration with Welsh Government. That will look at how we bring pathology services together across the region. Eye care is a particularly important one for us at the moment as well on a regional basis, because as we look at how we catch up on the backlog, where obviously with COVID we have banked a good number of challenges with all services, but eye care on a regional perspective is taking a bit of a lead. We've got a dermatology project which is very active at the moment, and for me certainly the really interesting parts of that coming up are around the work that we're doing with Swansea University and others on the artificial intelligence and the medical photography. So the artificial intelligence elements of this are connected obviously to the medical photography, but it's all about being able to use AI to identify where there are challenges automatically, so that we're not sending it to people. It's got huge potential to improve quality, to increase speed and accuracy of the way that we deliver services. We have a neurology project and currently looking at how we can do what has become known as shift left, I think, largely on these things, which is basically about catching people early in the process and helping them from deteriorating further. And then the cardiology project is also quite active at the moment, where you can see we've got other work going on around diagnostics and bradycardia pacing. And there are a number of projects, as I said, in the offing, and a couple of other things that are coming our way. But I think the key point to stick with on this one is that everything else that we do circulates and revolves around the service transformation projects. As Richard mentioned, we've got a number of things going on around with education, workforce and skills. And in particular, the university of late has been recommissioning for nursing, midwifery and allied health professional courses. We've been supporting projects to extend graduate entry medicine into West Wales with some really nice pieces of work going on in Aberystwyth. The university is working with us to extend and develop their new pharmacy, physiotherapy and occupational therapy education programs. And we think that working with people in this way will support recruitment and retention. So we're very hopeful that as we develop people within the area, that they'll, and there's a lot of evidence to support this, of course, that they'll be staying in the area and delivering services to the local population. And we've been looking as well at how we can bring the university into future workforce and design, where often, of course, universities will teach people what they think they need. And sometimes that matches the workforce designs within health boards, and but then occasionally there are some gaps. So there's some really interesting work there that we'll be taking forwards around future workforce design, and potentially looking at some joint contracts where there might be opportunities to work across the university and the health boards to start to take this sort of education, workforce and skills agenda forward in a much more coordinated and collaborative way. On the research, enterprise and innovation front, which I think which, as I said, is the bit that gets me most excited, even though, to be honest, I'm quite excited about the other pieces of work as well as they develop. But we've made some great progress on city deal projects. Pentre Awel, I believe, is out to procurement at the moment. So which is now Pentre Awel used to be called Delta Lakes, for those who might be familiar with the past in this. But it's a great centre being developed near Llanelli to take these things forward. And we made some really good progress on other campuses projects in the last couple of months, where we are proposing again a wellbeing and sports themed and a life science institute on the Singleton site, and with changes to the Morriston site, where basically we can bring together business, we can bring together academia, and we can bring together healthcare staff to be really driving the agenda on innovation, enterprise and research. And we'll be looking for partners and collaborators around all of these pieces of work over the next few months and few years. So there's some fantastic opportunities there for people to get involved and take part with us. The science parks and Institute of Life Science expansion is led again by Swansea University on this front, and again it offers some great opportunities for there. And of course, what others may have mentioned over the last couple of days is that there are a number of life science parks, there are a number of MediPark proposals developed for Wales. So we're working with other organisations across Wales, including in Bevan and Cardiff and the Vale and Cardiff University, to look at how we really make a Wales offer for the life sciences sector. University have been developing the Health and Wellbeing Academy. Richard and I have been taking part in the Arch Innovation Forum, and we had one of these on Monday, which is just a fantastic opportunity for staff within the NHS to put forward ideas and inventions and innovations and research opportunities that they'd like to progress, and for us to be able to help them to take those forward and consider how they do that. And it's a fantastic opportunity as well for businesses to put forward in new innovations. Yeah. So if there are things that people on the call this morning have been working on, where they're looking for opportunities to develop an evidence base, where they're looking for opportunities to connect into healthcare and to collaborate, the Arch Innovation Forum is a very formal mechanism for that. But of course, you can contact us at any point to see if we can help. I'll draw attention as well, I think, to accelerate NAGOR IP before jumping on to the next slide, conscious of time. But Accelerate, of course, spans the whole of Wales, and I think that AGOR spans most of Wales. But these are two great programs that are able to invest resources from the universities. They're able to invest funding from ERDF schemes to help staff, to help businesses develop new products and services. And their targets are about around the number of enterprises that they support. And I think, you know, Chris has probably mentioned this earlier around the opportunities with clinical engineering. We'll also be looking to develop joint clinical research facilities, partly to do with the campuses, but partly to do with other opportunities. And the connections, as Richard has mentioned, with the School of Engineering. There's a new wafer fab coming into Swansea. This really is the place to be if you're looking for opportunities from a commercial perspective, from a improving healthcare services perspective. Just a little bit of a sense of how that works in my mind, as much as anything else. You'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got the service transformation projects, and what we've been doing is we've been trying to identify opportunities through those projects where there might be innovation output, where there might be teaching output, where there might be research output, which would feed into that arch innovation pot. And then from the arch innovation pot itself, where the university is bumping into new research, new opportunities, new products and services being developed, where industry and business are bringing new innovations to the melting pot. We can support you to look at how they fit into the service transformation projects and look at how we can build collaborations, commercial opportunities for service improvement around that space. So I think, you know, personally, I'm incredibly excited about this. I think it's a great place to be at the moment, and I greatly welcome others to come and join us and have join the conversation. I leave you with that, and I'll put my name and my contact email address up there, which I think is spelled correctly. Yes. So that's my telephone number. If anybody wants to jot that down and give me a shout, and we can see how we can work together. That's it from me, Gwyn.
So, Sean, is that your new telephone number? And
no, it's the same one.
So you're happy for that to be shared, obviously.
Yeah.
So if anybody doesn't get to jot that down right now, then please just give us a shout.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that fly through of so many interesting projects there. And Richard, firstly, interesting comment you made there, an interesting observation you made about clinical versus industry timelines. And I think behind that is something about expectations in terms of when industry can get frustrated about clinical and healthcare providers adopting new technology rapidly, or where clinicians want the latest new thing. So how are you tackling that in on the ground?
I think I am off mute. Yeah, it was from an interaction that we had with a company actually who had a nanotech base but had never been involved with health before, and there were two things that we learned from that interaction. One was what I said, which was clinicians don't necessarily know what the next thing around the corner is. So in terms of what they envisage the next series of technology to be, or the next series of developments to be, it's really an extension of what we currently do, or what might look better than we currently do. Whereas the guys in industry, they're 2, 3, 5, 10 steps ahead of that in terms of what's coming around the corner, particularly in nanotech. And the other thing I think where we got in the weeds of that project a bit was, how do we support companies that haven't been involved with health before with things like MHRA, because they haven't been involved with that. So it was really, it was learning for next time, really. One was us starting up that a group of clinicians who might take the opportunity to meet up next time we have companies that are interested. But secondly, whether we can do something that smooths the way that from the industry side, because it's not an easy thing to get into, and there's quite a lot of, to get into the MHRA and to in terms of the paperwork required, really could do with some expertise to help guide people through that if they do have an interest, and especially where from a health perspective we're really supportive of it and trying to work with those guys.
Absolutely. The last thing you want is a new innovative medical technology that can actually provide benefits, but is being slowed up because it hasn't got the regulatory compliance. Which was it was a topic we covered actually in a session yesterday, and Chris Hopkins was present in, and maybe he shouldn't have, but he did air his expertise in that area. So I think he might end up being a point of call for advice and guidance on that area. We've also got some tremendous assets in our network. We've got Pete Phillips at SMTL, which is part of Shared Services, who's a leading light not only in Wales but in the UK in terms of PPE regulatory compliance. So I think we've got the expertise, we've got the assets in the network, and if we can all collaborate and work together, then we can help companies, but also help innovators within the NHS to tackle those barriers. So thank you. That's a valuable point. Sean, so you and I have been working for some time on collaborating across boundaries, across borders, in both formally and informally, in health and social care in Wales. Does Arch is this a new, more formal approach between the two health boards and the university that other organisations could learn from, and that we can spread out across Wales as a model?
Yes, but sorry, first, Gwyn, if I can, I did get the email address wrong, so I put it in the chat. But I think a couple of things. I think that this is a great opportunity to reinvigorate what's going on, right? So yeah, so there's a whole load of things that have been going on anyway, and I think that this is a fantastic opportunity to really put a little bit of a sparkle on that and get things moving quickly, because the COVID experience, I think, has shifted people's mindsets about the art of the possible. I think it's shifted people's mindsets about their willingness to participate and do different and new things. And I think we really need to capitalize on that space. From a can others learn from it? I think so. Yeah, the Arch collaboration has been going on for quite a while, and I've been on or around the edges of it in my role with the Bevan Commission. But I think that once you step into the Arch space and you start to look at it from that, you do see that there is an extraordinary level of collaboration across three organisations, which Arch in some ways supports from a governance and a decision-making perspective, but so much of it is just about the permission and the intent. So when you get into Hywel Swansea Bay, Swansea University, you don't really need to worry about whether you're allowed to work with other organisations. You're positively encouraged to do it, and the pathways are there. And if you don't know where the pathways are, you can come to me and the team, and we can point them out to you. So I don't see, maybe I'm a little bit blinkered, but I don't see where other organisations quite have this level of order and organisation around collaboration. And having attended a few meetings over the last couple of months, just basically the enthusiasm that you see all the way through from chairs, chief executives, people like Richard on the call. They are there to support and help this type of collaboration, whether that's your service transformation, your education, workforce and skills, the impact that has on the whole of the region, or supporting the research, innovation, and enterprise elements of things. I think there's a lot to be transported to other organizations that people could learn well from.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it just looks like exciting times. So I can't wait to see how all of this evolves. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I am going to move on to our next speaker, just to give him his fair share of time. And I know that Sean, we've got you back in a short while after a coffee break. So again, thank you for putting in 2 shifts. And Richard, it's been a real pleasure to speak to you. So thank you very much.
That's great.
Thank you.
Right. So I'm going to hurtle down the M4 now at a rate of knots, although I'll be keeping an eye on the 50-mile-an-hour speed limit cameras, obviously, coming out of Swansea and into Newport, and introduce our next and final speaker for this session, Tom James, an Iron Bevan University Health Board, Assistant Director, Innovation, and again, another partner of MediWales in addressing challenges in relation to collaboration and innovation for some time. So it's a real pleasure to welcome you, Tom, to the room, to the screen. And are you ready?
Hi there, Gwyn. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you and I can see you, Tom.
Great stuff. Yeah. A big welcome from sunny Cwmbran. I'm with the double caveat of working from home and Easter holidays. So if you do hear any background noise, fortnight, all that kind of stuff, then you may need to take that with a pinch of salt. People may be mowing their lawns on a nice day like this. Sean's going to be running my slides for me because I can't use my AB system for this one at home. I'm going to be talking to you guys today about the NHS Wales Innovation and Transformation Study. This was all to do about capturing new innovations as a result of COVID-19. Started about a year ago, and I guess the purpose behind it was noticed very, very quickly that lots of new innovations, ways of working, practice, transformation happened really, really quickly within the NHS. And I thought it was really, really important to capture that. And I guess whilst this started it within an Iron Bevan University Health Board, it very, very quickly gained traction throughout Wales through people like Sean and the other innovation leads across the different health boards to become a national study. And we've joined up with partners such as Welsh Government, the NHS Wales Confederation, HEIW, Healthcare Science Programme, Allied Health Professionals. I could go on to collaborate, create an evidence base, and to produce a report which will be coming out soon. Sean, are you able to get my first slide up, please? That's great. So this is the first slide. This shows some of the organisations that we've been working with on the study. Just a vast range of organisations and a vast evidence base. There's a very brief video that we'll play, which is on the next slide, which kind of talks through some of this stuff in a little bit more detail and gives a very succinct introduction. Next slide, please.
The COVID-19 pandemic has meant health and social care systems in Wales have faced an unprecedented challenge. However, during a crisis, people will do new and innovative things that they have never done before. We look at issues differently and take instinctive action that challenges the usual ways of doing things. The NHS Wales COVID-19 Innovation and Transformation Study has captured the learning so we can better understand the changes currently taking place throughout the sector. The aims of the innovation study are to understand the reasons behind the application of new practice and innovation during the pandemic, demonstrate an inherent permission to implement transformative change, communicate how we can apply practical real-world examples to other areas, highlight NHS Wales as a leader in innovation and new ways of working. Other themes discovered in the report include implementation of new ideas at pace, collaborative partnership working, remote or restructured service delivery, innovative use of new technology or products. We hope the report will encourage positive and meaningful changes that will benefit the people of Wales. Through collaboration, innovation and transformation, we can achieve a healthier Wales.
Great stuff. Well, I hope that puts a little bit of context around the report. What we're going to do, I'm going to talk you through how we approached it, how we, the partners that we got involved in the study, the way that we went about it. We'll talk through some of the initial results that the study has brought out, some of the analysis work. Later on then in the afternoon, Sean and I are going to run a workshop on to really get under the skin of some of the key areas that that the study has brought out to us. So some of the key areas of learning. So what we've been able to do through this innovation study is to look at and really develop a really strong evidence base for how the different types of learning, the different views from staff, the different type of stuff really that's been going on, and evidence really the different pieces of practice that have been brought out of the COVID-19 pandemic, with healthcare systems having to work fundamentally differently, very, very slowly, or very, very quickly even at pace. What we find is through the study is that it plays well to Wales's strengths as a well-networked nation, which have got partners who are willing to collaborate in an integrated policy environment for health and social care. And we were fortunate actually, to get Jamie Roberts involved in supporting the study early on during his time as an innovation fellow in Cardiff and the Vale University Health Board. This gave us a big jump in respondents, and I would be interested to see, how the gender balance of those respondents as well, whether it was a big jump in female or male respondents. I suspect I know the answer to that, but I'm not going to get into it too much. Next slide, please, Sean. Okay, so the study is based pretty much directly on the views of staff who have been working in the Welsh health and care system, and the respondents have shown show a sample of most staff groups, I would say, but although we would, as expected, I guess, we got less from the front line. And I guess what we started with during this was a focus on innovation, but this quickly grew in breadth as staff from across all NHS Wales responded, and a vast range of other evidence sources have been brought in. What this brought, I guess, was a big bucket, a big evidence base of qualitative learning and a whole range of case studies that brought in a much wider theme of transformation. So coming out of the analysis were 7 emerging themes, which gave us approximately 35 case studies from across NHS Wales that provided a whole range of real-world examples that brought these themes to life in practice. And through the report, you'll be able to see that there are, there's digital, there's a whole different range of evidence. This gives you a quick sample really on what is, a very, very broad and multi-layered evidence base. The innovation study looked at a range of national studies. So you can see here, the top there was the study that I kicked off, the NHS Wales COVID-19 innovation study. But actually then, in partnership, we were able to work with the Bevan Commission, who'd done an experience study of healthcare staff in partnership with the Wales Audit Office. There was an allied healthcare professional service change study, the healthcare science service change studies, plus a whole range of different case studies that for people who wanted to provide their views. The study also brought in then a range of more regional studies that have been done by different health boards, Hywel, Cwmtaf, Betsy, Swansea and Cardiff and the Vale. And this just added a real richness to this data, and a whole different type of executive type report staff working on the front line, experienced practitioners who are patient facing. It just brought a real range of data, which provided a challenge, I would say, to Swansea University to kind of pool all this data and really draw out the key themes from it. Next slide, please, Sean. So we're going to get into the skin of some of the key priorities or some of the key themes that came out of the analysis. Lots and lots of people talked about accelerated decision making, and with revised governance arrangements, lots of people talked about how decisions were made a lot more quickly. Excuse me a second. I'm glad I made that caveat now. Maybe we'll see that on the BBC News at some point. So reductions in red tape was how this was described, really. So this made an impact. The fact that decisions were made a lot more quickly. There wasn't a need for them to be escalated during, up and down through different decision-making levels. And this was really, really welcomed by a lot of people. Thank you, Alan. Yeah. So a lot of staff felt much more empowered to make decisions based on their knowledge and experience. So they didn't feel that they had to go and ask someone else about the things that they were doing, about the things that they did on a day-to-day basis, about how to do them differently. They were just able to make those changes themselves. And what people felt was that this enabled people to try new and different things, which led to shifts and changes in service provision. The staff views also highlighted a real need to capitalise on this momentum and to change and transform the way that we do business going forward. So actually the study, one of the aims you will have seen at the start was all about what is the good stuff that we really, really want to make stick, and how does that stick within the practice and the way in which we run our service going forward. Because a lot of people feared a return to old ways of working where they were not able to make the changes that they felt were needed to services in the best way that they felt for patients. Next slide, please. So staff wellbeing, huge focus on this. Big need to focus on staff well-being, and actually, it did note a range of interventions that were taking place across the system. However, the impact of these interventions varied quite widely across, a very, very diverse workforce, which raised the need for, a different range of interventions than the ones that, or a wider range of interventions than the ones we had, possibly that brought in partnership with other organisations. Specific interventions, say for example, the Royal College of General Practitioners offering specific interventions to GPs, frontline staff, and a big recognition that the staff working on the frontline who really felt that the biggest impacts of the pandemic, they needed support and guidance and support on well-being in much more accessible ways. So I guess we are left that whilst there is a lot of good stuff that's being done on staff well-being, there is more that is needed. A big sense of working together and collaboration, real pride noted in the way that staff pulled together through a difficult, high pressure time, people feeling empowered in being able to design and implement new approaches and do things in the best way, or the way that they felt was best, I guess was the thing. MDT and networked approaches were being used much more widely to use, the variety of skills to tackle new challenges. And whilst we know that MDTs are not a new concept, actually, the pandemic raised a new type of MDT model, or a new configuration of MDT skills to be put together off the back of it, which raised a range of, a positive, community spirit, feeling, cohesion, resilience, particularly alongside patients in the third sector. Next slide, please. So lots of talk about a more agile use of resources. Lots of people, including myself, got reallocated, got redeployed, and actually, there was a real feeling that, where there was a real kind of executive will to put people and to move people quickly to priorities, that happened. I guess some people said that this took place really, really easily, but others said that this was really hard, really hard going, and could be unnecessarily process heavy. And I guess, this linked to where things were, or where new arrangements were seen as informal, or where they were seen as formal. This kicked a whole load of processes into place, which slowed things down. And I guess this was particularly identified when redeploying staff, and you can understand elements of that, to people's working in conditions and working locations. But I guess the learning, I guess, from this was that more streamlined models are needed to be able to move staff to key priorities in the future to make the best use of the very, very significant staff resources that NHS Wales has. And this will, support business continuity and inform continuous improvement as we go through. Next slide, please. So a couple more. Sustaining the pace of innovation and change, so that a feeling of confidence and ability to try new things and provide services in new ways was reported as a big theme from the report. And I guess there was also a sense of liberation, that people were able to just kind of get on with doing the things that, some of the things that they felt that they'd needed for a long, long time. And off the back of that, I guess that, there were some really strong views that NHS Wales needs to capitalise on what they called the COVID-19 platform. And I guess probably the fact that the NHS was seen to be in one of the most change receptive states it had ever been, to make the changes to services that are needed based on what has worked to date. There was a big theme, and linked to this is the theme of digital access and confidence. And I think that's been reflected in some of the earlier presentations this morning, that lots of reports on the effective uptake and usage of digital technologies by staff supported internal working communication. It also provided more choice and control to patients over their preferred service use and self-treatment and management. And I think that's something that we've really, really got to focus on more and more and more now, is to be able to provide healthcare that fits around people's lives. Because as services in every sector really become more modern, they generally become more flexible around our own lives, and we can do them when we choose that we want them. Healthcare has traditionally been fairly inflexible on some of these things. Now, that doesn't work in all cases. I mean, you can't go to A&E from home, but there are some things that you can do from home. And I think what we've got to be able to do is ask ourselves the question of, are we providing digital services by default or digital services by choice? And I guess to support that theme, the digital skills assessments of our staff and patients should be considered to really look at wider digital inclusion. Next slide, please. So, embracing new technology, it has shown, the pandemic definitely shown that the systematic and rapid acceptance and adoption of technologies has been critical in responding to the pandemic. And they should be, the report will likely say that most areas of NHS Wales should set out how they intend to use technology better in regards to ongoing service delivery for the future. And they could and should perhaps be a clearer lead role for the central assessment and mandating of new tech and infrastructure technologies on a once for Wales basis, with Digital Health and Care Wales potentially having a role here alongside others. So a couple of other wider themes, something we've said before, but I guess is prevalent in all of the priority areas that the report has covered. COVID-19 undoubtedly provides a platform for us to change and try and transform our services in line with the recommendation of the health and care strategy for Wales, a healthier Wales. And actually the timing now feels better to look at some of that learning as part of the NHS recovery programme. But not just that, actually, NHS Wales has a significant role to play in carbon reduction, particularly through the use of technology. And we should really measure the impact of our change services on this agenda. And actually, I've got a couple of stats here on the next slide, please, Sean, that'll start to demonstrate that. So within an Iron Bevan, we've been looking at, what are the savings that we've made as a result of COVID-19? And actually, we've worked out that it's between April 2020 and January 2021, we saved around £650,000 on T&S. And actually, if you apply that figure across the whole of the NHS Wales on a yearly basis, that's over £4.5 million, which is a significant saving. Next slide, please. In an Iron Bevan, we've saved 1.44 million miles since April. And actually, again, multiplying that up across the year for NHS Wales, that would be 10.4 million staff miles that we can save through the use of Teams and digital technologies for meetings, etc., etc. Next slide. Actually, so for an Iron Bevan, if you take the miles that we've saved and apply that to a medium-sized car, that's 403,000 kilograms of CO2 that we've saved just as one organisation since April last year. And actually, if you multiply that across the NHS Wales for a year, we're talking nearly 3 million kilograms of CO2 that the NHS will have saved as a result of altered working arrangements, which is a fantastic amount, really. Next slide. So, based on some of that,
I'll just give you a 2-minute warning, Tom.
No problem. Yeah, I'm just winding down now, Gwyn. So thanks for that. So the innovation study report. So we've just released the emerging themes, the summary of emerging themes. We presented that to the NHS Wales chief executives on the 16th of March, which was really, really well received. Great to hear comments, for example, from Len Richards, who's the chief exec lead for innovation, around really wanting to nail for NHS Wales organisations wanting to nail their colours to the mast with some of the themes that have come out of the report. We've had media interest from BBC Wales on the report and the emerging themes. Some of the key themes from the report were mentioned in an NHS recovery piece that they did last week with Alka Hooja and Professor Sue Bale speaking on some of the themes that have come out of the report. So the report itself, the final report, will be launched in early April. The comms plan is being led by Welsh NHS Confederation and Welsh Government, and we'll be sharing that very, very widely through a range of comms channels off the back of it. So I hope that's been interesting to see what we've got going on. We'll get into some of these themes that I talked about a little bit later on in the afternoon, but I'll sign off from there. So thanks very much, Gwyn.
Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you, and apologies for asking you to finish up there, because I know that everybody is really interested in the study, and please do join Tom and Sean at 2 o'clock this afternoon, where there's going to be a little bit more time to unpack the issues and go into a bit more detail, and that'll be in a workshop format as well, so there'll be a bit more Q&A opportunities. So thank you very much for that, Tom. I do apologize for running late. That's my fault. I honestly thought this session was going to finish early. Well, there's a lesson learned there. I do apologize. We've got 5 minutes before the next session starts, which is an innovation surgery. It's interactive. It's your opportunity to ask questions. We've got experts on innovation from both the clinical side. We've got Sean again, we've got Melissa from Betsy, and then we've got our technical experts as well in terms of design and development from Mark. We've got Simon, who's a long-serving patent attorney and able to answer your intellectual property questions. And then we've got Mike from Verdi Corporate Finance, who should be able to answer any questions you have about finance. So finance, intellectual property, product development, and innovation all in the same session. So you've got 4 minutes to go and get a coffee and do whatever else you need to do, hang out the washing, and then I will welcome you back. So thank you so much for your patience, and thank you so much to all the speakers this morning who've really set the day off to a great start. So thank you.